first up, I believe, are the convoy organizers.
Good evening, sir.
Sure.
I'm Brendan Miller. I'm legal counsel for Freedom Corp, which is the entity that's representing the protesters who were here in January and February of 2022. I just have a few questions for you. I'm actually going to be quite quick. And first, thank you for your very detailed and forthright testimony already today. First question is just with respect to this agreement that had been set up between the protesters and truckers to relocate. I understand that the relocation was supposed to be of all vehicles from everywhere except Wellington. Is that correct?
No, it is not. The broad intent was to have vehicles leave the residential districts, and hence the priority was those districts south of Wellington, at the corner of Sussex and Rideau, and to a lesser extent, Coventry.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that it's our understanding, from our clients at least, that it was simply to be Wellington in the end. That was it. Does that change what you've just said at all, that that was the intention?
It doesn't, because I mentioned that there is great fluidity in our discussions with Mr. French around the notion that some could be relocating outside of Ottawa to separate areas, a farmer's field in Van Cleek Hill off the 417, etc. So we had no idea where they were going, but we expected the vast majority to relocate north of Wellington, where we were told it would be an easier perimeter to manage.
Right, and I also understand then that the mayor's vision for how this would work out as well, and some of the protesters and truckers, was that all trucks, other than the ones on Wellington, would be moved out of town, and that the protesters would just shuttle in buses from their camps outside of town on a go forward.
We were told that was an option, and we don't know if we have no insight into whether or not the organizers were able to pull that off.
Right. And you agree, and from your statement, that it was the police that prevented the deal from being executed in the end, correct?
My opinion is that it is a broader context of circumstances, and that the invocation of the Act created new, a new legal framework around Parliament Hill in that red zone, and that the authorities decided to take a step back and see what was the impact of the invocation of the Act.
Right, but it's fair to say that Mr. Wilson, in your dealings with him, he never indicated to you that the protesters and truckers ever intended to renege on the deal.
That is correct.
Thank you. Those are my only questions, and have a good evening, sir.
Thank you.
Right, and after that agreement was done, the protesters followed the agreement and tried to get on to Wellington, and the only thing that ended up stopping them was the police. Is that correct?
No, the police were there actually to help facilitate and traffic manage the congestion to bring them on to Wellington Street and away from the residential areas. So a senior officer was assigned, and my understanding was that it worked quite well, and then the Emergencies Act basically put a halt to that because all resources for police were needed to clear the area the following days.
I put it to you that after the Emergencies Act and it was invoked, and you may have heard some of this evidence yesterday, that there was just a change, and that it was the city who decided not to follow through with the agreement with the protesters, and that was what happened with respect to that agreement.
No, I believe that we did our best to live up to the agreement, and as did the truckers who did move, and we appreciate that. Because that was the first time, as you know, where there'd been any kind of movement on the ground. There was a level of frustration. There was more and more rowdyism that was taking place in the streets of Ottawa, And we felt, as my number one preoccupation was to protect those residents who had been putting up with horn honking 24 hours a day, diesel fumes that were coming into their apartments and condominiums, and general unruliness where people were afraid to leave their homes.
Right. And so you would agree then these statements that have been out by various people that the protesters did not live up to the agreement are incorrect. In fact, they did.
So I'm not sure who you're referring to.
There's been numerous. It's okay. But you agree that the protesters lived up to their end of the bargain, right?
On that particular issue, yes.
Right.